Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Chapter 19. Narrative resumed by Jim Hawkins. The garrison in the stockade. As soon as Ben Gunn saw the colors he came to a halt, stopped me by the arm, and sat down. "Now," he said, "there's your friends, sure enough. Far more likely it's the mutineers," I answered. "That?" he cried. "Why, in a place like this, where nobody puts in but gentlemen of fortune, silver would fly the Jolly Roger. You don't make no doubt of that. No, that's your friends. There's been blows, too, I reckon. And I reckon your friends has the best of it. Here they are ashore in the stockade, as was made years ago by Flint. Ah, he was a man to have headpiece, was Flint, bearing rum. His match was never seen. He was afraid of none, not he, only silver. Silver was that genteel." "Well," said I, "that may be so. So be it. But the more reason that I should hurry on and join my friends." "Nay, mate, not you. You're a good boy, or I'm mistook. But you're on a boy, untold. Now Ben Gunn is fly. Rum wouldn't bring me there, where you're going. Not rum wouldn't, till I see born gentlemen, and gets it on words of honour, and that you won't forget my words. A precious sight, that's what you'll say. A precious sight is more than confidence." Then he nips him. Then he pinched me this third time with the air of cleverness. "And when Ben Gunn is wanted, you'll know where to find him, Jim. Just where you found him today. Now here comes is the white thing in his hand, and he's to come along, and oh, and you'll say this, Ben Gunn, says you, has reasons of his own." Said "Well," said I believe I understand. You have something to propose, and you wish to see the squire or the doctor. Then you're to be found where I found you. Is that all? And when says you?" he added. "Why, from about a noon observation to about 6 bells." "Good," said I. "Now may I go?" "You won't forget?" he inquired anxiously. "Precious sight. Reasons of his own, says you." "Reasons of his own. That's the mainstay between man and man. Well then, still holding me, I reckon you can go, Jim. And Jim, if you want to see silver, why don't you go for to sell Ben Gunn? Wild horses wouldn't draw it from you. No, says you. And if the bum pirate ships came ashore, Jim, what would you say? But there would be widders in the morning?" Here he was interrupted by a loud report, and a cannon-ball tearing through the trees and pitched in the sand, not 100 yards from where we two were talking. Then the next moment each of us had taken to his heels in a different direction. For a good hour to come frequent reports shook the island. A ball kept crashing in the woods, and I moved from the hiding place to hiding place, always pursued, or it seemed to me, by these terrifying missiles. But towards the end of bombardment, I durst not venture in the direction of the stockade, where my balls felt offensed. I'd begun, in a manner, to pluck up my heart again, and after a long detour to the east, I crept down among the shoreside trees, and the sun had just set, the sea breeze in the rustling and tumbling in the woods, and ruffling the grey surface of the anchorage, and the tide, too, was far out, and great tracts of sand lay uncovered. The air, after the heat of the day, chilled through my jacket. The Hispaniola lay still lay where she had anchored, but, sure enough, there was Jolly Roger, a black flag of piracy, flying from her peak, and even as I looked, there came another red flash and another report that sent echoes clattering, and once more a round shot whistled through the air. It was the last of the cannonade. I lay for some time, watching the bustle which succeeded the attack, men demolishing something with axes on the beach near the stockade. The poor jolly boat, I afterwards discovered, away from the mouth of the river, a great fire was glowing among the trees, and that between that point the ship of one of the gigs kept coming and going, the men, whom I had seen so gloomy, shouting at the oars like children. But there was a sound in their voice which suggested rum. At length I thought I might return towards the stockade, as I was pretty far down low. Sandy Spit, that encloses anchorage to the east, and is joined at half water to Skeleton Island. And now I rose to my feet, and I saw, some distance further down the spite, and rising from along the low bushes, an isolated rock, pretty high, and peculiar white in color. It occurred to me that this might be the white rock of which Ben Gunn had spoken, that some day or another moat might be wanted, and I should know where to look for one. Then I skirted among the woods until I regained the rear, or shoreward side of the stockade, and was soon welcomed by the faithful party. I soon told my story, and began to look about me. The log house was made of unsquared trunks and pine, roof, walls, and floor. The latter stood in several paces, as much as foot or a foot and a half above the stand, and there was a porch at the door, and underneath this porch a little spring welled up in an artificial basin of the rather odd kind, no other than a great ship's kettle of iron, and with the bottom knocked out and sunk to their bearings, as the captain said, among the sand. Little had been left, besides the framework, but in one corner there was a stone slab laid down by the way of hearth, an old rusty iron basket to contain the fire. The slopes of a knoll and all inside of the stockade had been cleared of timber to build the house, and we could see by the chunks of fire what a fine and lofty grove had been destroyed. Most of the soil had been washed away or buried in drift after the removal of trees, only where the streamlet ran down from the kettle, in a thick bed of moss and some ferns, and very little creeping bushes were still green among the sands. Very close around the stockade, too close for defence, they said, and the wood still flourished high and dense, all the fir on the land side, but towards the sea with a large admixture of live oaks. The cold evening breeze, of which I had spoken, whistled through every chink of the rude building, and sprinkled the floor with continual rain of fine sand. There was sand in our eyes, sand in our teeth, sand in our suppers, sand dancing in the spring at the bottom of the kettle, and, for all the world, the porridge beginning to boil. Our chimney was a square hole in the roof, but it was a little part of the smoke that found its way out, and the rest eddied about the house, and kept us coughing and piping the eye. Add to this that Gray, the new man, had his face tied up a bandage for a cut he had gotten in breaking away from the mutineers, and that poor old Tom Redruth, still unburied, lay along the wall, stiff and stark, under the Union Jack. If we had been allowed to sit idle, should all have fallen into the blues, but Captain Smollett had, was never the man for that. All hands were before him. He divided us into watches, and the doctor and the Grey, and I, for one, the squire, the hunter, and Joyce were upon the other. Tired as we were, two were sent out for firewood, two more to dig a grave for Redruth. The doctor was named Cook, and I was put sentry at the door, and the captain himself went from one to another, keeping up our spirits and lending a hand whenever it was wanted. From time to time the doctor came to the door for a little air and to rest his eyes. We were almost smoked out from his head. Whenever he did so, he had word from it. "That man Smollett," he said once, "is a better man than I am. And when I say that it means a deal, Jim." Another time he came and was silent for a while. Then he put his hand on one side and looked at me. "Is this Ben Gunn a man?" he asked. "I don't know, sir," said I. "I'm not very sure whether he is sane." "If there is any doubt about the matter, he is," returned the doctor. "A man who has been 3 years biting his nails on a desert island, Jim, can't expect it to appear as sane as you or me. It doesn't lie in human nature. Was it cheese that you fancy, sir?" "Yes, sir, cheese." "Well, Jim, you see the good comes of being dainty in your food. You've seen my snuff box, haven't you? And you never saw me take snuff. And the reason is that In my snuff box I carry a piece of Parmesan cheese, a cheese made in Italy, very nutritious. Well, that's for Bengen. And the supper was eaten, buried old Tom in the sand, and stood round him while for band handed in the breeze. A good deal of firewood had been got in, and not enough for the captain's fancy. He shook his head over it, and told us we must go back to this tomorrow rather livelier. And that's when then we had eaten our pork, and each had a good stiff glass of brandy grog, and the three chiefs got together in a corner to discuss our prospects. It appears that they were all at their wits at what to do, the store being so low that we must have been starved to surrender long before our help came. But our best hope, it was decided, was to kill off the buccaneers until they either hauled down the flag or ran away with the Hispaniola. From 19 they were already reduced to 15. Two others were wounded, and one, at least, the man shot beside the gun, severely wounded, if he were not dead. Every time we had a crack at them, we were to take it, by saving our own lives, with the extremest care. And besides that, we had two able allies, the rum and the climate. As for the first, we were able about half a mile away. We could hear them roaring and singing late into the night. As for the second, the doctor staked out his wig and camped where there is marsh and unprovided with remedies. So, he added, if we are not all shot down first, they'd be glad to be packing the schooner. It's always a ship, and they could be buccaneering again, I suppose. The first ship that's ever lost, said Captain Smollett. I was dead tired, as you may fancy, and when I got to sleep, and it was not till a great deal of tossing, I slept like a log of firewood. The rest had long been up, but I had already breakfasted and increased the pile of firewood for as much as half again. And when I was awakened by a bustle and the sound of voices, "Flag of truce!" I heard someone say, and then, immediately after, with a cry of surprise, "Silver himself!" And at that, I jumped, and rubbing my eyes, ran into the loophole in the wall.